Lessons Not Yet Learnt is a podcast that uncovers the costly mistakes that businesses keep making and how to finally move past them. Through storytelling, candid conversations, and expert perspectives, I'm on a mission to challenge outdated thinking, bring those overlooked lessons to the surface, and drive meaningful change, one story at a time. Hi, welcome to Lessons Not Yet Learned, the podcast where we uncover the costly mistakes that businesses keep making so that you don't have to. I'm your host, Kiran Kachela, and today I want to tackle a pattern that we've seen repeated far too often in the world of transformation. The costly cycle of change teams being brought in too late, being pushed too hard to deliver, and disbanded too soon. Now, believe me when I say, I have seen this from every conceivable angle over the last 2 decades of my career in transformation. I've been on the receiving end of change. I've led change as an employee. I've delivered change as a consultant. And now I lead CI projects and we work across industries to drive change. And trust me when I say, it doesn't matter which seat at the table you're sat on, this is a challenge. And the cruel irony is that in today's landscape where businesses are struggling to save costs, the very teams designed to help drive change and efficiency, those change and CI teams, are often the first to face the axe. They're disbanded too soon, just in the thick of initiatives that were meant to deliver. Now, let me tell you a recent story. My team at CI Projects were called in by a university that was facing a looming crisis. They had a payment system that was due for decommissioning. It was on its last legs and it needed urgent replacement. Now, the university knew about this maybe several months, if not years in advance. Yet, it took this burning platform, this undeniable threat of this system being decommissioned in 4 months for them to finally act and recognise that they needed resource to help deliver this. So despite the fact that the time was ticking, time was slipping away and every second counted, they still spent a few weeks just confirming resource before they actually went ahead with the project. So by this point, we were really, really far behind schedule. My team at CI Projects were parachuted in to help turn things around in a very short space of time. Now, when the team arrived on site, they were met by an utterly overwhelmed but heroic project manager who, up until now, had single-handedly led this project wearing many hats. She was a project manager. She was a change manager. She was a business analyst. She was a subject matter expert. You name it, she did it. And so by this point, she was absolutely exhausted. And so when she saw the team, there was this sense of relief that just washed over her face. And this invisible weight just lifted off her shoulder. She was so happy that the team had arrived. So the team got stuck in, got embedded, got their hands dirty, rolled their sleeves up. And I'm really pleased to say that collectively with the project manager, they actually did it. Despite that short space of time, they turned things around. They started to build engagement and momentum. Everyone started to understand this project was happening and what it meant for them. So we were starting to see those first glimmers of hope that this project might actually land. But just as we were hitting our stride, the axe fell. The team was abruptly disbanded. The university decided to retreat to a very slim team, back to this single project manager who really needed the support. And they prioritised short-term cost savings over long-term gains. From their perspective, we'd already done the comms, there wasn't much more to do. And little did they recognise that there was so much more to do to help drive this project forward. Now, I'm sad to say, this story did not have a happy ending. The university, up to today, is still having to tackle some of those challenges that have fallen out from the project not being delivered successfully. And it's just a shame we don't recognise that it's actually going to cost much more in the long run than just getting it right first time. This is a classic textbook case of rinse, repeat, regret. Now, I'm really pleased to welcome my guests on today's podcast, Luke and Alex from the University of Nottingham, who have over 15 years of experience in transformation, and they are the Associate Directors of Change and CI. Now, just to confirm, the story I just shared is not in relation to their institution. However, they have their own first-hand experience, and I'm really looking forward to hearing more. So welcome, Alex and Luke.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you very
problem.
much.
So, Alex, you and I have been talking for quite a while now, probably a couple of years, about change and lean. And every time I speak to you, I'm always just so impressed by what you've been doing, the journey you've been on. So where did the CI and change journey start?
So probably a bit before we sort of connected, I'd been a team manager and had worked for a large company where McKinsey model, the 5 lens model was what they brought in. So I went through that as a manager, and then just absolutely, it was such a revelation of I've been making my life so difficult for myself without realizing it, and sort of fell in love with it. So I worked that way, with that sort of lean thinking head on for about a year, still running a team. And then there was an opportunity to move into the operational excellence area. And that's when I became a practitioner. And then my journey's gone on from there. And then my next move was into higher education. So that was the first time I'd ever been in higher education. But I think the fact of coming from a very commercial background, of having a slightly different lean approach, and coming into HE thinking, actually, there's some real thinking that I can bring forward into this about ways of working.
Okay. And so Luke, you were already embedded at Nottingham when Alex joined. So where did this sort of joined up approach around trying to drive this CI and lean, and as you say, trying to integrate other models and approaches start?
Yeah, so the University of Nottingham had been doing bits of lean for a number of years. So our old boss, Mick, he joined the university around 2012, did some lean work back then, and then he was given the go-ahead to establish a lean team. We were called Getting in Shape, which was always a bit of an interesting name. Some people did actually think we were, an exercise and fitness group. But obviously it was supposed to be getting the university into shape. We all brought different perspectives on how to do this type of work. I think because I'd been at the university a number of years already, I maybe had less of the lean knowledge, but really understood how the university worked. And so when Alex joined, the complementary by that time, I'd really upskilled anyway, but the complementary of someone coming in with all that external experience plus someone with all of the internal experience, I would say really supercharged the work that we were able to do.
People can fall into the trap of not enabling that outside perspective and fresh perspective, and can become quite institutionalized sometimes. And actually, you brought something from a commercial background, which you saw the value in straight away, Luke. So that's amazing. So getting in shape, talk to me. What was the landscape at the time that instigated this great initiative?
I think at the time, the university was doing well, but it was recognised that our processes could be very unstandardised. There was definitely a lot of waste in there. So it was actually started from our CFO, and we had financial targets attached to us because of it coming from the CFO. But pretty quickly in 2020, those targets were dropped because it was recognised that as an internal team, but helping departments make their own efficiencies, we couldn't be held accountable for someone else making that kind of financial saving. So those targets were dropped. But we always had 3 modes of working, and this is where I'm going to forget what they are, so you're going to have to remember. So, in fact, I've already forgotten when, if I'm wrong.
Right.
Enabling improvement.
Thank you.
Building lean capability. And the third one I always forget.
Yeah, the third one we forget.
Essentially.
Is that memorable?
Yes. But essentially, there's the long-term goal of making lean thinking just the way that you work, which is that really long journey that you go on. And that's probably what we mostly talked about when we had catch-ups around. That's really what I was pushing for, was that long piece. Training. So we built our own yellow, orange, green belt training and assessed those ourselves and delivered those internally. And then we had enabling improvements, which would be people coming to us and just saying, I just need to help with a thing. I just need to solve this problem. And then we would just go in and help them with solving that problem and be those sort of, most of the time, expert facilitators is really what they needed, was that just somebody independent in the room, because we weren't aligned in anywhere. The financial target had gone. That means you can be really independent when you go into a room and just facilitate what the best route and help them get where they need to be. And that was a real pull for me moving to the university when those financial targets had been dropped, because I had worked in a previous company, I had worked somewhere as an internal lean team where you were given a target, and that made it so difficult, because the onus when we go into an area became, we've already had 20% taken out of our budget. How are you going to make that happen? And that just is so, it's so the opposite what lean thinking needs to be, which is how do you empower other people to make their own change, to deliver it. So straight away as you walked in, it was all on you to make it happen. And that just felt such an uncomfortable place as a lean practitioner to be working in that environment. So that's been great since that dropped, that we could just go and help people and empower them to make their own change.
Yeah. We did still get work from the top down saying there's this area and we need to you guys to go in and have a look at it. But most of our work was bottom up driven, where people identified problems and contacted us, normally through word of mouth. They'd used it before, or their colleagues had used us. And that independence was so important. I still do sometimes, just stand there and say, look, I don't actually care. You can do what you want. It's up to you to decide.
Yeah.
All I'm here to do is facilitate that process.
People align lean, they assume lean is cost cutting. It has a negative reputation for that. And actually, I always say lean is value. Value can be defined as different things. You know, value might be cost, but it could be speed, it could be experience, it could be, you know, and in the university case, it's student experience, that's value. Yeah. So in that process, what were some of the challenges you found when you were trying to deliver your value proposition as a team?
Lots, I think. I think as me and Alex have progressed within the university, the challenges have changed. So when we were first working together, we were both senior lean practitioners and almost at the coalface of doing that type of work. And then it's always the same things that you get, that you don't have time, or they don't have time. They don't have the people, or they don't really understand the problem that they're trying to solve. So the challenge was really all around building that trust and credibility. And I think we both had success in different areas of the university of doing that. But I would say there were other parts of the university that just complete closed book, and we didn't want to play, weren't interested. We always went where the wind was blowing. So, you know, why hammer against a closed door? If there's somewhere that wants us, we'll go there. On the premise that certainly in a university setting, that people talk, and if you do a good job somewhere, then they will tell other people and that will generate the work. But yeah, the standard problem of not enough time and not really understanding their own problem.
We made that decision to just go, we're just not going to force ourselves. It's going to be, we'll go where we need to go. Everybody always loved the training, so we'd pick loads of people up from that. And then, especially at the top for our exec board, we started doing activities, sort of rapid improvement events, Kaizen events, essentially.
Yeah.
But sort of 3 or 4 days in a room, and we would have a sponsor. And very much in the early days, once one person on the exec board became a sponsor, then everybody else going, well, they've been a sponsor. Why have I not been a sponsor? And so actually we built an awful lot on reputation over that time. And that's what filled our workbook really and enabled us to grow, to manage the volume.
Yeah.
But it's interesting as well, though, because they all then wanted a rapid improvement event. And going back to, they didn't really understand the problem. So unless you understand the problem, you don't know whether the rapid improvement event is actually what you need. And so we ended up doing lots of work trying to educate people. Go, yeah, okay, you can have one, or you can have this. Let's actually have a conversation. And instead of just asking for a thing, can you just ask us for our help and we'll work the best approach.
Yeah. But so you guys adopted this early adopter approach, essentially, where you decided rather than pushing, a closed door, you're going to take those early adopters, those light bulbs that you see out across the organisation that really want to embrace this change, because essentially lean is a mindset. And you can't force a mindset on somebody, right? What you can do is you can encourage. And I guess one of the ways you did that is actually by showing, learn by doing, right?
Yeah.
But people being able to see the things that you're doing that then attracts them and makes them think, oh, I want to be part of that. I want to jump on the bus.
Yeah.
That absolutely sounds like it's worked really well. Have you found examples of lack of investment or responding too late?
Everywhere. I've worked in big UK global companies before, but actually working in a university is literally like working in a small town of individual little businesses that work like individual businesses, see themselves in that way, and don't necessarily think, I've worked in huge corporations, but they'll see themselves as one thing, and you don't get that in HE. I'll give you an example. Our previous Vice Chancellor wanted a rapid improvement event, was huge. It ended up about 40 people. It was a student plus staff crossover, cross-functional sort of process. Lots of people involved, and that would normally be a 10-week run into that to make sure the sponsors know exactly we've really nailed down what the objectives are. We know exactly what we're getting out of it. We've got the right people in the room of what needs to go. And I had about 3 weeks. And it was like, well, the Vice Chancellor wants it, so it's just got to happen.
Yeah.
I ended up having to lead an awful lot of that, which actually isn't what you want to do. You want the sponsor to come and set them off, and then you want a team leader that you've coached for those 10 weeks in to be able to be the front man, and you can just be the voice in the back going, is this activity really getting where we need to be? I've got something up my sleeve, and I can just stand up and present if there's a specific lean tool or technique we're going to use, but they're actually going to own the event and run the days.
So for you,
so it changes how you set it up and how they own it.
Yeah. So for you found that the impact of bringing the change team in too late essentially was that actually everyone didn't own it the way in which they should. Right. And actually you ended up having to lead a lot of it to get it done in a very short space of time. The consequence was lack of everyone else being involved and owning it. And
I think the what I view as a success after you've done those events is that essentially you don't see us in the room. After the event, lots of people would come and ask me additional things, or they would refer to it as a getting in shape event. And it's like, if it's been successful, I don't want anybody to think it's a getting in shape event. It should be seamless on the background. It should be whatever department is running it, whoever the sponsor is, it's their event.
Yeah, I love that. So we're like invisible fairies that come in and wave our wand and make it work, but we don't need the credit because this is about everybody taking ownership of change and continuous improvement. And Luke, do you have any examples of where you've seen teams being deployed too late?
Yeah, rather than from a lean or a CI perspective, so my more recent role has been supporting the university's strategic projects and programs. And I don't know whether too late is one way of looking at it. I would probably phrase it more of a undervalued, and misunderstanding the need to bring people along on the whatever the change is. Yeah. And so often it's either under-resourced from the outset or just not resourced. And then you get towards the end and then they're all of a sudden, well, no one wants to do this thing. And you think, well, no wonder why no one wants to do this thing. It's not a massive surprise. So I would argue that the majority of the projects and programs that I've been supporting over the last couple of years, that has been the reality, that it has been under-resourced or undervalued.
Yeah.
And you then see it in the aftermath of the go live.
Absolutely, the impact is felt. So when we say undervalued, and I know exactly what you mean there, the value is not always recognised. Why do you think that is? What's missing from the senior leadership team?
I think it's a lack of understanding of what it actually takes for people to change their behaviour and do something differently. So we have recently implemented a large ERP system, and you could look at it two ways. You could look at it successfully because it went live and people are using it, and it controls our payroll. People are getting paid generally. So all of those things. But then there's also a lot of unforeseen, or probably should have been foreseen, stress that has been caused on people. And the change team on that particular program worked incredibly hard. But we're talking 9,000 staff, and yet the actual amount of resource put into helping support those staff change their behaviour, it's been, I think, way too small. So I don't think I actually answered your question. I just gave you another example of why of it going wrong. But
what do you think would help? What do you think would help leaders to understand better what is really needed and the impact of change not done right? What's needed?
I think I have so many things in my brain of what I could talk about. I think there's a couple of things for me, which again, is not just about the university. From other places I've seen this sort of pattern through, particularly sort of right at the top, is the element of going out and actually seeing what's going on. I do definitely see a pattern of being told what's happening or using data to understand what's happening, but how often do they actually leave an office, go out there, do those things? I think from a CI or change perspective, one of the other things is actually understanding what we do. And I think this is a really generic thing across any function, any sector, is the element, and I've had this happen in more than one company, where they go, we don't need a change team, or we don't need a continuous improvement team. Everybody can do continuous improvement. And I think if you ask anybody in any company, do you continuously improve? They will say yes. If you say, do you solve problems? They will say yes. So this misconception that it can be done by everybody and everybody will do that starts to happen. And therefore, we don't need to pay for a continuous improvement team because everybody will do it. I think it's about them understanding actually what we do and changing those questions. If you actually asked people, do you fix things and do you have to fix them more than once? That is a different answer. Do you work in a continuous improvement way and actually use tools and techniques? Do you stand up and talk about performance? Do you have things written down? You will get much different answers to just, do you continuously improve? And that's not people trying to hide it. That's people's misunderstanding of what we actually mean by continuous improvement. So I think because we're not frontline, we can then become in danger. And it's happened to me more than once, where you're then seen as a nice to have at the point where, as a business or an institution, this is absolutely the point where you're at crunch time, where you really need us in this profession to be able to come and help.
Playing devil's advocate, many people say, well, this is just a nice to have function and continuous improvement is part of everyone's job. Yes, it is. But there is a skill set there. There is a need to instigate that inspiration and provide people with support and the framework she talked about, the methodologies. But your question there around, are you continuously improving something, but then still seeing the same problem reoccur over and over again, is a result of sometimes people that either don't have the capacity or don't have necessarily the rich toolkit and framework and capability to actually get to the root cause of the problem and solve it once and for all. And I think that's the value that a CI team can bring. But actually, the CI team is almost leading everybody else with that mindset. It's absolutely a mindset, and you need to work hard to get everybody wanting to be on that journey.
Yeah.
What about on the back end? So you've now delivered a project, ERP as an example. Okay, so in plain sort of, have we met this project objective? Well, we went live with the ERP system. What does the back end of that look like? Are we investing in making sure that these changes are sustained and controlled? Are we still keeping resources on there, or do we pull them too soon?
Yeah, so they get pulled too soon, particularly on one of the big challenges with funded projects and programs is that the funding is normally tied to the end date of the project or program, which is typically a couple of weeks after go live. So if it was a system, for instance, and then it's just like, and then we just hope that everyone is going to sustain the change. So it nearly always, what I would really like to see is for change support to be funded slightly differently. So still out of the overall budget envelope, but those contract dates or secondments, however it is that you're resourcing it, to continue for a number of months. Now, obviously, it depends on the size of the project and program, etc. But the again, going back to that ERP, it wasn't until quite towards the end of the project that we're going to need a team to support this system on an ongoing basis. And it's like, of course you are.
Yeah, yeah.
So, and I have some sympathy for project teams in those situations, because you're embedded in the project and your focus is on the deliverable and the next date and the next milestone. But there really should be we need to stand up and have a look around and think about what, it's not just about the next month or the next 3 months, it's what's the next 12 months look like, etc.
And I have to say, from my experience too, I've seen exactly that. I've seen project resources signed off on a budget up to maybe a week or two after go live. And then we assume that magically the benefits are all going to be realised and everyone's going to have adopted the new way of working. Just magically, they don't need support. And actually, I think you're right. I think we're too focused on the deliverable rather than what good looks like. What is the outcome that we're actually trying to achieve? What does good actually look like? And if we change the goalpost to that, perhaps we'd think about resourcing slightly differently. But, in many cases, it's an afterthought. We realise later on that, actually, we might need someone to actually support this. So, yeah, it's just realigning that goalpost.
Yeah, I think that there's a mindset shift that's needed, which is we're not looking at what we've delivered. We're looking at why we're delivering it, because it's the why, the benefit, that's actually important. So, we might create a new policy and they go, well, we've done that, win. We've thrown it over the wall. Now there's a new policy. Everyone's going to be, accountable for X, Y, and Z. And it's just nonsense. And so what we should be focusing on is, why are we putting that new policy out there? And what do we need people to do differently as a result? And how do we measure that so that we know we've actually achieved the point Otherwise, it's just pointless, isn't it?
Exactly. So where are you now? So you've obviously been on this great journey of continuous improvement with all the great initiatives that you guys have been leading. Where do you sit now?
Okay, so unfortunately, the university and higher education in general finds itself in a particularly tricky financial situation. And as we've already discussed, sometimes functions such as ours are the easy targets for making those cuts because of the the potential lack of understanding. So where we're both at the moment is that the university is restructuring, and within that restructure, our teams don't exist anymore. So we're both taking the opportunity to take voluntary redundancy and move onto bigger and better things.
Oh, it's a shame, but also equally exciting for you both. But yeah, as you say, I've seen this play out across higher education sector. We work with a number of higher education institutions, and it is really sad to see that often it's the CI and the change team that are the first to be axed, actually. The irony of that they're often the ones that are there to help drive the organisation through some of these turbulent, economically challenging times. So, yeah, thank you for sharing. What's your one lesson that you want to share with the audience today? Your one lesson that you feel is not yet learnt?
Go and see. Get out. The higher up I see people go through organisations, the less and less of that starts to happen.
So true.
And then the company I worked for initially, where I learned that it's just getting that balance then, because they did learn that lesson because we were doing the McKinsey 5 Lens. They were all encouraged to go out and do things. The balance to that is just them making sure they don't become reactive to the one thing they happen to have seen when they go out and sit in. Because then it would suddenly be, we've seen this one thing with this customer, we'll change the whole policy across the UK. Like, that may never happen again.
Yeah.
I've never come across that before. It may never happen again for another 3 years. So, but the more they get out and do that and practice, the more you can handle that reactivity, and then they become less reactive.
And I think the more that teams get used to it as well, because the first time it happens, then everyone's like, oh, why's the big boss it kind of reaction. And then the other thing that often happens within a university setting is that if someone very senior is going to visit a department, it becomes almost an event, a bit like the Queen visiting or something. And I remember we had a new senior executive join the university, and they went on tours around all the schools. And I was working in one of the schools at the time, helping them do some CI work. And there was like this big run-up and prep event of, right, we're going to do this, then we're going to do this, then we're going to do this. So that senior exec will have got absolutely no reality of what it's actually like on a day-to-day basis.
So your one lesson not yet learned is go and see. And as you said, Alex, the higher you get up the chain, the less and less it happens. But then equally, when it does happen, we need to make sure we've got the right balance of understanding what we're looking at and how we respond. Brilliant. Thank you so much for today's episode. That was really, really useful and valuable insight for us.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
So the CI fix from today's episode is go see. Step away from the screen, come out of the boardroom and go to the shop floor. Go and get your fingernails dirty. Go and speak to people and go and see where the real problems lie. Because it's only then that you truly understand what can be improved and the value of continuous improvement. Now, go see is actually a principle in the lean philosophy, and it's called Gemba in Japanese. And it actually translates to where the real value is created. And it was developed by a Japanese industrial engineer and businessman called Taiichi Ohno, who is like the epitome of lean and the father of something called the Toyota production system, which organizations across the world look to look at what good looks like. It's the gold standard. Now, did you know that Jeff Bezos, founder of Amazon, when he was building his tech empire, actually decided to make all of his executives take shifts on the customer service desk so that they could really understand what was going on, what customers needed, what problems were being faced, what types of questions were being asked. And that is a true example of Gemba or Go See in practice. This is the way to really understand firsthand operationally what's actually going on. Now, I'll leave you with a quote that Taichi Ono himself once said. He said, "Don't look with your eyes, look with your feet." Thank you very much for joining today's podcast episode, and we'll see you on the next one.
This episode was sponsored by Fujitsu, your digital transformation partner in higher education.